Earlier this week, we talked about the most surprising NHL teams, both good and bad, at the halfway point in the season. So today I wanted to do something similar, but instead of teams, we're going to be talking about players. And this won't just be a list of 5 or 10 guys. I'm going to be picking one surprising player from all 32 NHL teams so that there's a little bit in here for everybody. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking. So if you disagree with any of my picks, feel free to let me know what your picks would look like down below in the comments. If you guys do end up enjoying the video by the end, please remember to hit that like button. It does help out the videos a ton. Let's see if we can hit 1,000 likes on this video. And of course, if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button. And with that all being said, let's go ahead and start the video off with the Anaheim Ducks. And I definitely have to go with Frank Vatrano. He is a first-time All-Star this season. Not that that is something that we really look at when it comes to career accolades, but it's worth mentioning. He's got 21 goals in just 44 games with the Ducks so far this season. His previous career high, just 24, so he's only 3 goals away from tying that. Vatrano has a very team-friendly contract, making just $3.65 million for the remainder of this season and through next, which makes him one of the more cost-efficient goal scorers in the league. Frank Vatrano has really bolstered his value over this last year and a half as a member of the Anaheim Ducks. They have to be really happy with how he's played. For the Arizona Coyotes, my pick is definitely goaltender Connor Ingram, who was claimed off of waivers by Arizona back in October of 2022, and man, what a waiver claim that has turned out to be. Connor Ingram has been a beast for the Yotes in net this season. 15-8-1, 5 shutouts, which is insane. That's a third of his wins are shutouts. He's got a save percentage of .918 and is amongst the league leaders in goals saved above expected. Ingram has accounted for 15 of the Coyotes' 21 total wins on the season, and you have to imagine down the stretch, the second half of the season, Ingram's going to be getting a lot more starts as the Coyotes look to compete for one of those wildcard spots. The Boston Bruins are up next, and I'm actually going to go with Jake DeBrusk. This is a guy that I thought would pop off this season, maybe with a little bit more opportunity with everything that the Boston Bruins lost in the offseason in terms of their forward core, but it's actually kind of been the opposite. He's having a down shooting year, just 9 goals in 42 games after scoring 27 in just 64 games last year. Now, don't get me wrong, Jake DeBrusk, when he's not scoring, still a very impactful two-way forward for the Boston Bruins. They use him on the penalty kill, and he's good in that role, but the production, the finishing especially, just really hasn't been there like I expected it to be coming into the season. Speaking of guys having a down finishing year, my pick for the Buffalo Sabres is Dylan Cozens, who has just 7 goals and 22 points this season in 42 games after scoring 31 last season in 81 games. Cozens was a massive part in why the Buffalo Sabres had such a lethal offense last season. They were top 5 in goals for per game, and just as he was a big part of that last season, I think he's a big part this season in why the Buffalo Sabres offense doesn't look anything close to as good as it was last year. Now, it's not just Dylan Cozens. There's a lot of guys who had fantastic seasons last year that haven't been able to replicate that this season, but I had really high hopes for Cozens coming into this season, just given his age and the projection his career has been on coming into this season. The Calgary Flames are up next, and I'm going to go with Jonathan Huberdeau. As we all know, last season was a disaster. His first season with the Flames couldn't have gone worse, but I did have faith coming into this season that, he would bounce back, probably not get back to being, a 100 plus point player, but at least a guy that's, maybe hovering around a point per game. As we all know, that has certainly not been the case, and Huberdeau's production is actually down from last season. He's on a pace lower than he finished at last season, which is just insane. I feel like this is one of the crazier drop-offs in a player's production that we've seen in a very long time, just off of a cliff. Now, in Huberdeau's defense, he has been a little bit better as of late. He's got 6 points in his previous 5 games, so maybe he's turning it around, but still, when you look at his numbers on the season as a whole, especially considering the fact that he makes $10.5 million, just not good enough. Moving along now to the Carolina Hurricanes, I definitely have to go with forward Stefan Nason, 30 years old, a bit of a journeyman. He's played for a lot of different organizations throughout his NHL career. This is a guy who was playing a full season in the American Hockey League as recently as the 2021-22 season, but over these last 2 years, he's really came on strong and played a nice role for the Carolina Hurricanes. So far this season, through 42 games, Stefan Nason has 11 goals and 26 points, which is more points than somebody like Jesperi Kotkaniemi, somebody like Teuvo Teravainen even. That is fantastic production for a guy who averages just a little over 12 minutes of ice time per game. He plays his role and he does it beautifully. He's also just making pretty much league min this season. Unbelievable value for the Carolina Hurricanes. I seen a chart on Twitter today from Mike Bartner, who's a fellow hockey content creator, and it's least expensive, cost per point players, forwards only and no ALCs included, and Stefan Nason is number 1 on that list. The Chicago Blackhawks are up next, and I'm definitely going to go with center Jason Dickinson, who prior to this season, throughout his career, has really just been known as a bottom 6 shutdown centerman, a face-off guy, but man, he's kind of went on a shooting bender this season with 14 goals in 44 games, which is already a career high for Dickinson. He's got 21 points, just 9 points shy of his career high, which he set last season with the Hawks, and his strong first half of the season earned himself a pretty lucrative 2-year extension from the Hawks the other day, especially for a guy, of Jason Dickinson's reputation. So good for him. Next up, we have the Avalanche, and I'm actually going to go with Jonathan Drouin. Now, at the start of the season, I actually had pretty high hopes for Drouin, coming in, playing on McKinnon's line, reuniting those two. They were so dynamite together in junior playing for the Mooseheads, but Drouin's start to the season in Colorado was a disaster. He wasn't producing, his ice time was cut down heavily, and he actually ended up being a healthy scratch at one point, and when that happened, I was like, okay, Jonathan Drouin, he may just be toast in the NHL, but over the last month and a half, he has really turned things around and came on strong, which has been a little bit of a surprise to me after, like I mentioned, he was healthy scratch at one point. It's been really nice to see. He's up to 25 total points on the season in 43 games. He's on pace to finish the season with the highest point total he's had since 2018-19, where he had 53 points in 81 games with the Habs. Drouin has managed to work his way back up in the lineup. He's back playing with Nathan MacKinnon, and man, he's thriving right now. He's playing a ton of minutes, and he's making the most out of this opportunity. He's producing, and you just love to see it. This is a guy that I'm always going to root for. Moving along now to the Columbus Blue Jackets, easily has to be Johnny Gaudreau for me. Just 7 goals and 28 total points in 44 games. On pace to finish this season with the lowest point total he's had in a full season in his NHL career, which is pretty crazy. Now, obviously, playing on a really bad Columbus team doesn't help, but I'll say the same thing about Gaudreau as I said about Huberdeau. Gaudreau's making $9.75 million, and you just need more for that kind of price tag. For the Dallas Stars, I'm going to go with Matt Duchene. Now, I had pretty high expectations for him coming into the season. I thought Dallas got an absolute steal and that he was one of the best bargain signings of the offseason, but I would definitely be lying if I said I expected Matt Duchene to be up there in production with the likes of Rope Hintz, Jason Robertson, Joe Pavelski, and the top guys on Dallas. Matt Duchene has been fantastic for the Stars, and again, one of the better value signings of the offseason at just $3 million for 1 year. Next up, we have the Detroit Red Wings. I'm actually going to go with Patrick Kane, somebody who was obviously brought in mid-season, and when the Red Wings signed Patrick Kane, I had really low expectations. This is a guy who was coming off of a hip resurfacing surgery, a surgery that historically people don't really make comebacks from or play well when they do come back. I figured Patrick Kane was going to play, limited minutes at 5-on-5, be a power play specialist, but he's been one of the Red Wings' better forwards since signing with the team, and they're using him in a big role. Is he, vintage Showtime 100-point Hart Trophy Patrick Kane anymore? No, obviously not, but he looks 100 times better than I thought he was going to, and for the price of admission, I think Patrick Kane has been well worth it and has been a really good signing for Detroit. The Edmonton Oilers are up next, and I gotta go with Zach Hyman. Now, sure, he had 83 points in 79 games last year, 36 of which were goals, but I thought that was definitely going to be peak Zach Hyman. I didn't think he was a guy that was going to be able to keep up that kind of production, even with playing with the likes of McDavid and Draisaitl, but man, was I ever wrong. Hyman having another monster season with 42 points in 39 games, 26 of which have been goals. He leads Edmonton in that category, and he's somebody that just continues to get better year after year, and it's really came into his own, and he's a lot more skilled than I think people give him credit for. Throughout his career, especially in Toronto, he was viewed as more of a complementary piece, somebody that, plays well off of stars, and obviously he does that, but I think Zach Hyman is a star in his own right as well. It's absolutely crazy to think how well this signing has aged for the Oilers, a signing that was heavily criticized at the time. For the Florida Panthers, this is an easy one. It has to be Sam Reinhart. Now, it's not like this is a guy who's, having his first breakthrough season. He has been an established NHLer and a very good one at that for a long time. Incredibly consistent, just one season in his NHL career, finishing with under 20 goals, had scored 30 in his first 2 seasons with the Panthers coming into this season. But man, this is a guy who prior to this season, I don't think you'd really view as even the best player on his team. He'd be behind Barkov, behind Tkachuk, and then all of a sudden this season, not only has he been probably Florida's best player, he's been one of the better players in the entire NHL. Sam Reinhart literally does everything for the Florida Panthers. He's second in the NHL in goals with 32. He has a very strong 200-foot game, plays well on both special teams. The only downside of the season Sam Reinhart is having for the Panthers is the fact that it's a contract year. He's set to become a UFA at season's end, end, and they're definitely going to have to back up the Brinks truck to keep him around. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Kings. Another easy one for me. It has to be Cam Talbot, who has turned out to be a fantastic signing for the Kings. Coming into the season, my biggest concern when it came to LA was the goaltending situation. I just had trouble viewing a team with a Cam Talbot Phoenix Copley tandem as a Stanley Cup contender. Lo and behold, Cam Talbot has not just been serviceable for the Los Angeles Kings, he has been one of the upper echelon starters in the NHL this season. Now, obviously the Kings have really struggled as of late with just one win in their previous 10, but that's definitely no fault to Cam Talbot, who I think overall this season the Kings have to be incredibly pleased with. Going from one surprising goaltender to the next for the Minnesota Wild, I'm going with Filip Gustavsson, who's been, on the other side of the spectrum in terms of surprising. He's been very disappointing, and this is coming after a year last season where Filip Gustavsson probably would have been a prime candidate for the Vezina Trophy had he gotten more starts. There isn't much to like about the Minnesota Wild this season outside of rookie sensation Brock Faber. Every aspect of the team is really struggling right now, and that's including goaltending. For the Montreal Canadiens, I'm going to go with Cole Caulfield, who scored 26 goals last season in just 46 games, an unbelievable close to 50 goal pace. I thought this season for sure we'd see Caulfield, crack the 40 goal mark at least for the first time in his career, but it's looking like he may even struggle to replicate his goal total from last season. He's got just 13 in 43 games. The finishing is way down, the shooting percentage way down. Obviously not something I would worry about if I was a Habs fan. I still think Cole Caulfield has all the tools in the world to be one of the league's best goal scorers, and I think eventually he will be, but this season really hasn't lived up to the expectations that I had for him coming in. Moving along now to the Nashville Predators, I'm going to go with Gustav Nyquist. Yes, we have a Nyquist appearance, who at 34 years old is having one of the better seasons of his career. 11 goals, 34 points in 44 games. He's playing close to 17 and a half minutes a night. He's been a very important piece of Nashville this season, and he's putting up these kind of numbers on a Nashville team that I've really expected to struggle offensively coming into the season. Just like Ryan O'Reilly, Gustav Nyquist has been a fantastic signing so far for the Preds. For the New Jersey Devils, it's got to be Timo Meier. I know he missed some time with injury, but even when he's been in the lineup, just doesn't look anything close to the player that we thought the New Jersey Devils were trading for. Just 9 goals and 15 points for Timo Meier in the 28 games he's appeared in. He's a minus 16. I don't like to put a lot of stock into plus minus, but when you look at some of the other plus minus totals on the Devils, especially in just 28 games, I mean, that's bad. Pretty much every area of Timo Meier's game has taken a significant hit this season in New Jersey. Not a good start to his big extension. The New York Islanders are up next, and I'm actually going to go with Bo Horvat, who's having a fantastic season. 17 goals, 41 points in 43 games. Seeing how Bo Horvat played on the island in the 30 games he played for them after the trade from Vancouver and the playoff series he had, I just figured that this contract, $8.5 million for 8 years, was going to age horribly. I didn't think Bo Horvat was a bad player, but I just really didn't think he was a guy that's going to be worth that kind of money. And so far this season, Horvat has certainly been worth that kind of money. He's somebody that the Islanders have relied on heavily. He's playing close to 19 and a half minutes per game, and he's doing really well in pretty much all situations. The New York Rangers are up next, and I'm going with 37-year-old goaltender Jonathan Quick. Now, when it comes to the New York Rangers, they don't really have to rely on their backup a ton, obviously because they have Igor Shesterkin, who, when on top of his game, is amongst the best of the best in the NHL in terms of goaltenders. But when called upon this season, Jonathan Quick has not just been good, he has been fantastic, and at times has looked like vintage Jonathan Quick. He's probably having statistically one of the best seasons he's had in at least like 5 or 6 years. Next up, we have the Ottawa Senators, and I'm going to go with Matthew Joseph. Now, he has only played in 29 games, he's missed some time, but when he's been in the lineup, he has been fantastic for Ottawa. 19 points in those 29 games, the majority of those points at even strength. He's top 30 in the NHL in terms of even strength points per 60 minutes. Incredibly efficient, really impactful for Ottawa, and definitely a bright spot in what's been a pretty disappointing season for that team. The Philadelphia Flyers are up next, and I'm going to go with defenseman Sean Walker, who I thought was kind of just the throw-in in the Ivan Provorov trade, salary filler. I didn't think he would play much of a role for Philadelphia this season whatsoever, or much of an impactful one at least, but he has been a huge part of Philadelphia's blue line that has been really good this season. Sean Walker is on pace for a career high in points. He's playing great defensively, is averaging the most minutes per game that he's averaged in his career, and if the Flyers, for whatever reason, fall out of the playoff race leading up to the deadline, at $2.65 million, if they retain 50% of that, especially with him being a right shot defenseman, which is highly coveted, this is a guy that could probably fetch the Philadelphia Flyers a pretty high draft pick. If not, then his play has probably earned himself an extension with the Flyers. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm going to go with goaltender Alex Nedeljkovic, who has turned out to be a fantastic signing with Pittsburgh and has really thrived there in a backup role behind Tristan Jarry, and this came as a pretty big surprise to me as a Red Wings fan. I watched a lot of Nedeljkovic over the last couple of seasons, and as we all know, last season he really struggled in Detroit and wound up playing the majority of the season in the American Hockey League. So it's been really nice to see him bounce back in Pittsburgh and really find his game again. For the San Jose Sharks, I guess I'm going to go with Mikael Granlund. I mean, his production is kind of on par with what it's been throughout his career. He's always been a solid playmaker, but on this version of the San Jose Sharks, I didn't really expect anyone to thrive, and like I mentioned, Granlund's been a good playmaker. You know, who's going to be the trigger guys on this team? So the fact that he's on, you know, around a 60-point pace, I think has been pretty surprising. Next up, we have the Seattle Kraken. It has to be goaltender Joey Daccord, who prior to this season, the most games he started in a single season was 8. He's a former 7th round draft pick by the Sens, and all of a sudden this season he's burst onto the scene and has been a fantastic starter for Seattle. Goaltending is just so weird and hard to predict. Guys come out of nowhere. Joey Daccord is 13, 6, and 8, a massive reason for the Kraken's turnaround over the last month and a half. He has a 14.2 goals saved above expected, which is amongst the league leaders. Joey Daccord has really been the saving grace for the Seattle Kraken this season since Philip Grubauer went back to being bad. For the St. Louis Blues, I'm going to go with Jacob Vrana, former Red Wing. Looked so good for St. Louis after he was dealt from the Red Wings to the Blues last season around the deadline. He had 10 goals in 20 games. Jacob Vrana really is such a talented goal scorer, and he just can't seem to put it all together. We don't know, what happened in Detroit, what led to him being dealt by the Red Wings. Obviously, there's some off-ice stuff going on with Jacob Vrana that we don't know, but it really is just a shame to see someone with so much talent and somebody who has shown so many flashes throughout his NHL career of being just an absolutely lethal goal scorer, struggle at this level. He's playing in the AHL right now, and he's producing well down there. I know Jacob Vrana doesn't, really play the best 200-foot game, but he's a guy with the talent that he can just score 30 goals in his sleep. It's crazy to see him struggle as much as he has over these last couple seasons. Tampa Bay was kind of a tough one for me. I was going to go with Vasilevsky, but he missed training camp, missed the first month or so of the season, had surgery, so he's got a reason why he hasn't really been great. So I decided to go with Nikita Kucherov, who has been ridiculous, and I feel like is quietly tied for the league lead in points. It seems like not a lot of people talk about Kucherov, but the dude is just so good. He's got 28 more points than Tampa Bay's second leading scorer, who's Braden Point with 44 in 44 games. If the Tampa Bay Lightning manage to make the playoffs, Kucherov's definitely going to have a pretty strong Hart Trophy case. The Leafs are up next, and I definitely have to go with goaltender Ilya Samsonov. He was one of the better starters in the NHL last season, I would say in the top 10, so I guess it was probably realistic to expect him to drop off a little bit, but I don't think anybody could have seen this coming, where he went from being arguably a top 10 starter, or probably not arguably, definitely a top 10 starter last season, to this season being probably the worst goaltender in the NHL when you look at his numbers as a whole. His negative 13.49 goals saved above expected is the worst mark in the league amongst goaltenders who qualify. Just a complete disaster of a season so far for Samsonov in Toronto, and you have to imagine if things don't turn around, he's probably going to be on the outs sooner rather than later. They're going to find a way to move him, and the goaltending carousel in Toronto just continues to go round and round. They've went through so many goaltenders, it feels like, over these last few seasons. Next up, we have the Canucks. So many guys having career years on Vancouver, but I'm definitely going with Brock Besser, who's got 27 goals already in just 44 games, just 2 goals shy of tying his career high, which he set as a rookie back in 2017-2018. And it's really nice to see Brock Besser having this kind of season, because over the last few years, I feel like he's kind of somebody that fans of Vancouver have grown frustrated with, because, he showed that, 29 goals in 62 games as a rookie, over a 30-goal pace, and then for so long was just never really able to get back to that. So it's nice to see him dominating this season the way that he has. For the Vegas Golden Knights, I'm going to go with Ivan Barbashev. He was such a big part of their Stanley Cup run. He had 18 points in 22 games, had fantastic chemistry with Marchessault and Eichel. I expected Barbashev in his first full season with Vegas to probably have a career year playing with those guys, but it really hasn't been anything but. He's got just 19 points in 44 games. Then in the first season of a contract that pays him $5 million per year through 2027-28, it's not looking too hot now. Obviously still very early, but knowing Vegas, they're going to trade him in a cap dump trade in the next 6 months. Next up, we have the Washington Capitals, and I feel bad even doing this because, he's 38, he had to fall off at some point, but it's got to be Ovechkin, right? He was just so superhuman for so long when it came to scoring goals that now that he's finally struggling to score, it's just such a surprise. Even though he is 38 years old, it felt like he was just going to score, 40 plus a season forever until he decided he didn't want to anymore. We've really never seen Ovechkin slump slump like this. Maybe it is just that, a slump, or, Father Time is finally catching up to him. I think the second half of the season for Ovechkin is going to be fascinating to follow, because if he isn't able to bounce back, it makes chasing Gretzky's goal record a lot more interesting. And now finally, finishing out the video with the Winnipeg Jets, I decided to go with Vladislav Namestnikov, who's having a fantastic season for Winnipeg. 23 points in 40 games, he's a plus 18, and he's one of those guys that's able to do a little bit of everything. He can play center, he can play the wing, he could thrive on a fourth line role, and he can step up and play in the top 6 as well, which he did really nicely for a large part of the season for the Peg. Namestnikov is a guy that I absolutely loved in Detroit. You always know what you're going to get 100% every shift, so it's nice to see him doing that in Winnipeg and also, producing this well offensively. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those were, in my opinion, the most surprising players from all 32 NHL teams at around the halfway point of the season, a little bit past that, I guess now. Again, like I mentioned at the start, I always want to know what you guys are thinking, so if there's any picks that you disagree with, let me know what your list would look like down below in the comments. If you guys enjoyed the video, please remember to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.